Okay, so we're ready to make a pizza now. So we've been talking for a long time about how the oven works and everything. So it hasn't been a pizza in the oven. And the oven has fallen out of balance. The pies themselves are used to balance the heat in the oven. And since we haven't had a pie in for about 20 minutes or so, the oven is totally out of balance. To correct that a little bit, I've actually pushed this down to 0. It now says 8 and 0 because I don't want the bottom to overheat. That's the biggest danger, the biggest problem that you could have. However, even though it's set to 0, the bottom could still overheat because the top is radiating down onto the bottom surface. So in all likelihood, the bottom is still too hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this spray bottle and I'm going to spray it right in the center of the oven where I'm going to put the pizza. Now, the way I have the spray set is I have it set to so that it's not completely atomized, it's not a complete mist, nor is it a complete line. It's sort of in the middle. And I'm just going to give a few sprays here. And it's sort of skipping right over the middle of that. Okay, and you can see it just boils right off. And now I'm ready to, that spot is a little cooler than the remaining sides, and I'm ready to put my pie in. But I've got a problem, which is that my pie has been sitting on this peel for 15 minutes while we've been shooting this video. And so in all likelihood, this pie is stuck to the peel, which is actually good because we want to demonstrate some of the things we do to make sure the pie is not stuck on the peel. First thing to note is that the oven also has this little shelf. So when pizza comes off of the make line, you can set it down here, and you can do a couple of things. Sometimes the pie has shrunk, so you can sort of stretch it out a little bit more, which is always good. And during that process, you can get a sense, you can feel, you can give a little shake and see if the pie is stuck to it. Now, whoever made this pizza should have pinched these balls a little bit more. Max. Because the balls do have a tendency to roll off when we're getting the pizza peel off of it, out from under it. Okay, so Willie's now going to show you, the peel's thoroughly stuck to the stone. Willie's going to show you now if the pie is salvageable, and he's going to try and get off the stone using a couple of our tricks. Go ahead, Willie. This is where I get out of the picture.
First, you grab the pizza, and as Jeff said, you give it a little stretch. It might have been moved around a little bit, and it's not symmetrically round anymore. So you start from the top, and you take your fingers, and as you're symmetrically getting it to the sides, you're also running your fingers underneath the crust, and you're feeling for anything that may be stuck to the peel. So you're doing two things at once here. And I do not feel anything being stuck down here, so we're good. And after you do that, you want to give it a quick little shake. If you have movement, you're good to go. You can go right in the oven. If you see that it's still in one area kind of stuck, you can bang it down on here a little bit and get it unstuck. If not, just grab the peel, pick up one corner, blow very lightly under there. You're going to see some mounds of air stick up. If there's one that's kind of not dropping, you just pick up the edge of the crust and let that air out.
Why don't you do that one more time before you go in there?
Now, it can be a problem. You know, believe it or not, that bubble that he just created can be transferred into the oven. A certain way that you could pull the peel out, that the bubble can be transferred, and that dough won't cook properly. So when you're putting the pizza in the oven, you want to make sure that as you're jerking it off, you're tipping it a little bit so that if there is a bubble, it will let the air out before it collapses onto the stone. Okay, let's go ahead and close the oven now. And now we're going to wait. Okay? Now, we cannot move the pizza until that dough changes from dough into bread, right? Explain that a little bit, Willie.
Well, the dough is very, very, very soft. And if you try to take your peel to check under it, you're basically going to make a hole in it. So you have to wait until you start getting some sort of structure on the dough itself. And it usually starts happening on the edge of the pizza. That's when you would take this particular peel here, which is the best one to use, and you start inching around the side of the dough. I'm going to open that up and show a little bit. You start inching around the side of the dough, and once you're able to move it around, then you want to go just a little bit deeper pull up. And once you feel your surface is pretty much moving and freeing around, okay, right here, we still have no color, but we can still move around. This is very, very premature if I was to do anything with this pizza at this point. So we're just going to close it. We know that we have some separation from the dough and the stone, so that's a good thing, but we don't have any color yet, so we just leave it alone.
Now, one thing I noticed about that pie is we're starting to get a little color on the bottom, and the top had no color. So it wasn't too bad. It was fairly well balanced, but it could be a little off. In that case, in the case where the bottom is cooking faster than the top, then you want to take you want to take a screen, and you want to get the pie onto this metal mesh screen. What this screen will do is it will keep it from burning. So this won't transfer the heat. Even though this is metal and will heat up itself, it'll never transfer that much heat into the pizza like the stone will. So he's going to look underneath the pie right now. And actually, it doesn't really need to be moved onto a screen, but just to show, I'm just going to put the screen there, and he's going to move the pie onto the screen. Okay. So he's got it, and he's lifted it onto the screen. Then he can put the screen right back in that spot. He also rotated the pie right there. I don't know if you saw it real quick, but show how you rotate the pie, Willie.
Well, to rotate the pie, we basically pivot. So if I want to go to the right, I put my peel on the left. I tip, and I move, and it moves to the right. Same again if I want to go to the left. I put the peel on the right side, I tip, and I move. And that's your rotation.
Right. Okay. Now, the pie is going to cook more in the back. It's going to cook faster in the back than it is in the front. So as he rotated the pie around, this part that you can see right here, this nice burnt crust, that came from the back of the oven, right? That color came from the back of the oven. Whereas the crust in the front didn't really have much color, but when you rotated the pie around, the other side's getting color now. Okay, you think it's ready to take out, Willie? Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Let's take a look at that bottom. Okay, that's the pizza. That looks like a great pie. Let's take a look at the bottom. And the bottom was a little undercooked. The bottom's a little undercooked because we put it on that screen, but we sort of knew that. Okay? Let's start with a new pie, and this time let's try and get the balance exactly the way we want. Okay, we're going to put the next pie in the oven, and we're going to learn a little bit more about how to rotate pies within the oven. It's all about balancing the temperature, top, bottom, front, back, left, right. Willie's going to give it a little spray now. Not too much. And he's giving it a little blow underneath. And then he's placing the pie right in the center of the oven, closing the door right away. So in a couple of seconds, we're going to know if the bottom's cooking faster than the top or the top's cooking faster than the bottom. Let's just go over a couple of the basics. If the pie is not cooking that fast on the bottom, which is rarer, but it certainly happens. If the pie is cooking very slowly on the bottom, then what we want to do is we want to get it onto a hotter spot as soon as possible. The sooner you deal with a temperature imbalance issue, the better. Let me give you an example of where somebody might do it the opposite way and gets them into trouble. Let's say, for example, that the top is cooking and the bottom is not really cooking much at all. And that happens sometimes. Well, getting the bottom to burn up, to char very quickly is actually fairly easy and a very quick process. All you have to do is move it to the back of the oven where it's super, super hot. And that bottom will char up very, very, very quickly. 5 seconds, 10 seconds. It can go from white to completely charred in 5 or 10 seconds. So there's a tendency to say, well, I'll just do that at the end. I'll let the pie cook. I'll let it cook the top all the way through, and then I'll just finish off the bottom at the end by pushing it to the back. That will produce a pie that looks okay, but it won't actually have the right internal structure, and it won't taste as good. It won't have as good of a mouthfeel. The better way to deal with that issue is to really move the pie as soon as possible. So, this is a good example. Let's look at that bottom there right there. Let me get some light going on that, and we can see. There we go. We can see that the bottom is not cooking very much at all, right? So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move it onto a hot spot, even if it's just for 5 seconds or 10 seconds or even less. I just want it to get going. I want it to get started. Then I can move it back to a cooler spot, and it will continue to cook from that point. If I do it that way, then now it's started to cook, and for the next 30 seconds or so, it will continue to absorb that heat. That means it's gotten a more even bake, and it's much more comparable to the top. That's the better way to deal with that situation. Similarly, some people will say, well, the bottom is burning too quickly. I'll wait till it's almost perfect, even though the top's raw. I'll wait till the bottom is perfectly charred, then I'll put it on a screen and try and stop the heat at that point. Much better to move it on the screen earlier and then move it off the screen and let it finish off on the stone. So you want to keep both sides cooking continuously all the way through. That's the way you're going to get the best tasting pie. See how that bottom has continued to cook? Almost done now. What do you think, Willie?
Let's see.
The bottom looks done.
Got a small
Now it
hole.
does have a little hole in it. That's because we're talking and we're videoing. Let's use the other peel to show how it's a little more effective in dealing with a pie with a hole. Can you see the hole?
Yep, it's going to be on the right side.
Can you see it on camera? See it's boiling through there? See the steam coming out? That sauce transferring through to the stone.
Now, what I would do is I'd get as close as I can to that hole and flip it up really quick and slide the peel right under.
That's perfect, Willie. Great little technique, great little trick. Now, let's go ahead and let's move the pie over here. And I'm going to show you a little trick that we're going to do. Now, if the hole's really big, and actually this hole is pretty big. If the hole is too big, then you really have to remake the pie. But if the hole is small enough, you can use the pie. And the trick that is to cut a hole right through the hole. So when we're going to use the slicer to cut the pie, well, cut's got to be somewhere. It might as well go right through that hole, and then no one will notice the difference. It's one of those little tricks of the trade that you learn if you're here long enough. Now this hole is probably too big to serve, but it's right on that line, right on that cusp. Let's talk about rotating the pies within the oven. This part's a little tricky and takes a little bit of practice. I don't know if this video is going to come out necessarily the way we want to, if we're going to be able to cover all the topics, but I want to give you a basic understanding. Right now the oven is hot all the way across the bottom. If I put a pie, let's say, in the middle, well then that spot in the middle has cooled off. It's cooler. But the other two spots are hot. So you may actually come onto an oven and you're saying, wait a minute, the center's too cold, the outside's too hot. Where do I put the next pie? And how do I deal with this situation? Well, there's a variety of strategies, but the main goal is you want to put pies on a spot where they're not going to burn instantly. And that's because the pie, when it goes down for the first time, when it first hits a spot in the oven, can't be moved for about 30 or 45 seconds. Whereas a pie that's already been in the oven for a minute or two, that can be moved onto a fresh spot, even a super hot spot, for just like 5 seconds and then moved off because it's a little more sturdy. So if you had a choice right now and you had, let's say, too cold in the middle and too hot on the outside, here's how you deal with that situation. You put the pie on the cooler side so that you know it's not going to burn, and you leave it there until the pie is firm enough to be movable. At that point, move it a little bit on to the left, and if that's going to heat it up too quickly, you move it back to the center. But at that point, it's absorbed some of the heat from that super hot spot, and now maybe it's cool enough that the next pie could go on it and absorb the heat and bring it down to temp. Does that make sense? And if you had a couple of pizzas in the oven, you might rotate them both onto that hot spot to just bring that temperature down a little bit. So you're constantly just mindful of where the temperature is higher. Once I get it off that center spot and onto that super hot spot, that gives time for the center spot to heat up again. So there's a certain balance and rotation that just takes time to learn. And the balance is within a deck, and also you can do a multi-deck balance as well. Willie, what do you want to add to this?
There's definitely an acclimation period with the oven guy and the oven. You're going to get to know your hot spots, your cool spots, what works better as far as a rotation in different periods, times of service, where you're more busier than the others. I'm going to touch a little bit on the actual deck rotation. When we're busy, the idea is to ideally not move the pizza and let it cook all the way through. It doesn't happen all the time. But we can get closer to that ideal if we use a deck rotation. Okay,
I mean, if the oven were perfectly balanced, you wouldn't have to ever move the pie, and it would cook move best. It would be the best tasting pizza. Everything would taste better. The sauce would taste better. The
Correct.
cheese would taste better. Everything tastes better if the pie is never moved, never rotated, and just bakes perfectly top and bottom. But it's hard to do.
Correct. So, what we do here at Varasano's, we try to stick with an oven deck rotation, where we enter one pizza in one deck, and when we have multiple pizzas coming at us, we got orders coming, we'll go ahead and enter the second pizza in the second deck. What that allows us to do, instead of opening the oven for a second time for the second pizza, you're letting a lot more heat go out, and it's going to take longer for your pizza to cook, and the more likely you are going to move it around. So if we go ahead and go just to the second oven, then our third pizza would be the second time we open this oven, and your first pizza will be pretty much almost cooked. And that's how the rotation works. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Right. Now, if you're continuously, now let's say you pull that pizza out. So now the top deck is empty. So you made pie 1, pie 2. Now pie 1 comes out. Would you put the third pie into an empty deck? Would you put it back in the same spot, or would you rotate it to the middle spot?
No, we would keep on going, because then the goal is, after we're done, in the very last spot, let's say number 6, number 1's ready to go. It's a fresh, hot stone, and we're going to cook just like we put the first pizza.
Right. If you kept putting pies here and never got to those, then those spots would just keep heating up. This would keep cooling off because the dough is blocking out that heat and absorbing that heat. And then the oven would just get continuously more out of balance. So it's better to sort of do pie 1 here, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then sort of come back around. And that way, every part of the oven's getting a little bit of pie on it, and that pie is removing the heat and rebalancing.
You kind of want fresh heat on a hot stone for every pizza.
That's right. Let's see. What else can we say, Willie?
In addition, you're also gonna probably more than most of the time gonna have to finish that bottom pizza. So when you're in that rotation, if you look really quick, Jeff spoke about these 3 stones. You want to keep your hot stone in that same zone. So if I'm working this pizza and I need to finish the bottom on this stone, I'm just going to move it directly to the back of that same stone and keep it in the same zone.
Right. So essentially, if you think about it, the oven really would have room for 1 pie in the front and 1 in the back. But we don't do that. We keep 1 pie in the middle for the most part.
Correct.
Because the front is too cool. Even though we set that front heat adjustment, we're opening the door too much. The front is still not hot enough. So we keep the pie in the middle. But there's generally enough room to push it to the back. The back is your hot spot, and that's where if your pie crust is not cooking on the bottom, you want to move it to. So you can take that pie and move it to the back for a few seconds and then move it back to the middle again. And that's something that we do very, very commonly to get that bottom crust cooking if the bottom's not cooking as fast as the top.
Correct.
Did we really show properly the fact that we have to rotate the back to the front every time? I know we showed 1 spin, but maybe we should really just show that essentially every time we put the pie in, I would say 95% of the time, the back is cooking more than the front, and the pie has to be spun around just about halfway through cooking, and that lets the front cook.
Correct.
Make sense? Okay. Okay, we'll see a little more of this when we get into the individual pies. Yes?
Yes.
Great. Okay, that's the oven video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. This is the part that probably needs the most hands-on practice. There's only so much that we can impart in a video. So work with your manager, work with your trainer, and experiment yourself when it's not as busy, and learn from the people around you, and you're going to be making great pizzas in no time. Thanks, guys.